Welcome to Dan's Talks. My guest today is Susan Isaacs, the celebrated author who's written more than a dozen books and has many New York Times bestsellers among them, and several of them that were made into films, which we will be talking about. And welcome to the show, so to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here.
I wanted to first talk to you about the newest book that you have just finished and it's come out on. It's called Bad Boy Leroy Brown, and came out in May, I think. And
Bad Seymour Brown.
all right, see,
I was
I
in
think
the middle of a Jim Croce festival.
I was
And then
thinking
I,
when I was growing up, I think we called it Leroy, but that's
right.
so
You
stuck up.
did, of course.
And he was a bad boy, apparently, from what I read for some of the first chapter of it, um, and got his. So we'll have to learn more about him as time goes by. Um,
Great.
it's a book where a lot of this new book I thought might be, and I'm not sure, not autobiographical, but in terms of where it's located, I thought that might be how your home is with a crowd of people. But maybe I'm mistaken. As it's a big house, and that is her parents, the heroine's parents, live in one part of the house. It's during COVID. And
And stay.
and stay right. Um, but I was curious about one thing I wanted to talk about was how did you get into this in the first place? I know you studied English and at college, and then your very first book, which was Compromising Positions,
Right.
was a stunning hit, became a movie with who were the stars of it? I forget.
Susan Sarandon, Raul Julia, Edward Herman, Judith Ivey. So it had a
And
great cast.
you must have been a young woman. This was your first attempt at a book. This is not supposed to happen like that.
Well, right, it's not. And all I was hoping for when it did get published was that I'd have a thing to go back to, have a career or a semi-career. Before that, I had been an editor at 17 magazine, and I also did freelance political speechwriting. So, but I didn't want to pursue either one of those things. And I just wanted to be home with my kids. Um, and so I started to pass the time because children aren't always the most scintillating companions, and they nap a lot. So I started reading mysteries, more than were healthy. And the writer gets to a point where she says, then that's when you know you're a writer. You said, I could do this.
Right. That's what I'm thinking.
And so I immediately, it was a suburban housewife, and her, I needed a, a body. And at the time, I was having some gum problems. So I thought, who better to knock off than a periodontist? And I and I just wrote it. I mean, it was turned down, but I had a wonderful agent. I got a wonderful agent, Gloria Sapphire, who was a
Oh,
was a Bridgehampton um, person, and she said, "You go home, start on the next, uh, go back to your typewriter, and I'll sell it." And she did. The thing was, it became a Book of the Month Club dual main selection with GARP, light comedy, dark comedy.
yeah.
and the big paperback auction, and then it became a film, and it was translated into 30 languages. So I had more than a career. I mean, I had some side kind of a reputation. Um, and I just kept doing it. It allowed me to be home, not just for the kids. Given my personality, which can be, very outgoing when I'm giving a speech, and I love my friends, and but basically I'm more of an introvert, and I like sitting alone in a room telling myself stories. That was more satisfying to me than writing political speeches and being in meetings with polls, or um, doing magazine work. Uh, and so I just was able to create other universes.
Did you have a special writing room in the busy house?
Well, at first, it was in our bedroom. And in those days, my first book was written on a typewriter.
Right.
And they had these copy sets with carbon paper and everything.
Yeah, sure, I do.
And I would, as I finished, I would toss them, vaguely toward the bed, and sometimes it landed. But essentially, my husband got tired of getting into bed and hearing a crinkle. And and so he said, let's build you an office. So at that point in our marriage, my kids were, I think, 3 and 5. Um, I had an office right in the basement, near the laundry room. And, occasionally I would hear the dryer thumping away. But I was able to have that alone time when the kids were at school, and I was able to write.
The perspective that you had at that time was right on the money. You have, I remember reading Shining Through, and
Right,
you've got women who are heroines who come through extraordinary circumstances in your books to triumph in the end. And
right.
I was curious about how that might have changed, if at all, over the years, that perspective, with the changing of, women's lib moving to Me Too and stuff like that.
Right. Um, it changes, but it doesn't, because the one thing I sensed early on was that all you have as a writer is your own voice, and your own outlook. If I try to be Jane Austen or Joyce Carol Oates, I will fail utterly. But if I do Susan Isaacs character, then I have it. And I was certainly a strong believe a strong feminist, still am. And yes, the movement changed from free to be you and me, to I'm not a feminist. I don't call myself a feminist. That and then it goes back and forth, and all I can do is stay consistent. And what I like is writing about women, and women who have adventures. Now, I have written about men as well, and one of my books that takes place out in the Hamptons is narrated by a man. Magic Hour. Magic Hour was, and but it still had a strong woman character, and that's what I like. I also like, now one of the reasons I didn't continue Compromising Positions as a series at that point was that I wanted to try other things. It wasn't only my first novel, it was my first shot at fiction. So why get stuck in something that will go on forever, and 40 years later I'll be writing Compromising Position Goes Hawaiian. And so my second book was about a political speechwriter, Close Relations. Third book, Shining Through, took place during the Second World War. It was about a woman who was eventually German-speaking legal secretary who got involved in OSS because she went where her boss went. And she goes undercover into Germany. So I did a few espionage books. I don't know, 5, 6 mysteries, sagas, whatever I wanted to write. And there's a freedom about it, but it's also, at some point, the reader said, who's just read one mystery, will say, this isn't a mystery. And so I kept up with that until 2 books ago.
What do you mean by this isn't a mystery?
Well, because it may be a saga, it may be about it may have an element of mystery in it, or it may be like Lily White, which is a look at what a con man does, the ultimate misogynist to women, and how Lily White, which she called herself Lee because Lily White was just an embarrassing name, and she's a former Nassau County assistant DA who becomes a white-collar criminal defense lawyer, and she figures it out. She figures out what the deal was, and finds and it was a very exciting book, but it's not a mystery.
Tell me about your connection with the Hamptons and why you chose that one book to be set out here with that narrator. You're a frequent visitor here, and I don't know if you're a resident or not, so maybe you could let me know. Tell us.
Sure. We had a house out there for 20 years in Bridgehampton, and we rented in East Hampton for a while. Loved it out there, but we also wanted a place to go for the winter where I could be cut off. The Hamptons they're beautiful. I love it. I felt when I wrote Magic Hour, which is that glorious time of day, but right before dusk or right before dawn, when the sky is suffused, that directors love to film in. But Magic Hour had evoked a lot, and the person in that book, the woman accused of a crime, is a former film writer, screenwriter, which I had been also. I had, in the midst of all the novels, etc., had tossed off a couple of screenplays. So that actually got made. And but we and I wanted to see the Hamptons. Nobody really will talk to you at length in the summer because they're too busy, people who live there. And so what I found was that hanging around there in the in the winter was perfect for me.
Oh,
And not only did it have its own beauty, but it had people who were, oh, good, a writer who wants to talk to me. So, and, spoke to a lot of, had lunch with a lot of cops, and got my character's, my narrator's point of view. He was a retired homicide cop.
no.
Not a retired, sorry. He was a homicide cop, a recovering alcoholic, recovering heroin addict, and an interesting guy. So I was listening to all these macho radio shows in the morning, and just letting the guy side of me let 1,000 guys blossom or something. It was fun. It was fun.
What are you working on now? What
Now, well, this Bad Seymour Brown is the second of a series that I started with Takes One to Know One, which is the adventures of Corey Geller. And Corey is a former FBI agent. She was in the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and speaks Arabic, has and also has and Spanish, and has a real feel for Muslim culture and a real appreciation for it. And she partners up in this book with her dad, who's a retired NYPD homicide detective. And she and her family are from Queens. I know that it's, they're my peeps. And they're living on Long Island, and her husband's a federal judge. She met him, fell in love, and he's kind of getting some thrill that he put aside at Harvard College, Harvard Law School, being in a law firm, being on the bench, that he couldn't avail himself of. But she's a whiz at Krav Maga, and which is a form of self-defense, and it's really glorified street fighting. And so she's, that's not me. I mean, she may be my kind of person, but I don't go to that. But she loves adventure. They have a daughter. He was a widower. She adopted his daughter and loves her dearly. And so I have all these recurring characters who become enriched. That's why I wanted to do a series. The one I'm working on now is called Afternoon Delight. And it's about it has a kind of off Broadway fundraising background, but it's about a lot more. But again, Corey has a big adventure, and she observes worlds. Besides her father, her mother is an actor whose prime role was in Days of Our Lives for a half season until they killed her off.
Thank you for all the writing you've done, and some of which I've read and enjoyed.
Yeah. And vice versa, Dan.
What?
thank you for all the writing you've done.
I guess so. I still remember the first day when I got something called WordStar, which was the precursor to Microsoft Word, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is
I
amazing!
know.
You don't have to use
Absolutely.
paper anymore." Et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, thank you for being on the broadcast, and I will see you soon. And
Okay.
good coming book.
Okay. A pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.